There are many people in the world who really don't understand. Freedom has many difficulties, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in.
Welcome, everybody, to the Leo Zagami Show Special Edition. Today, Thursday, June the 19th of the year of the Lord 2025. Leo and Christy Zagami for the Leo Zagami Show. How are you, Christy?
Good.
Okay, today we have a lot to say, as I've published a few articles of interest on leozagami.com that have let's say, spread around the internet and made and created waves, because we are telling you today the untold story of what is happening in reality with this attack that started on the 13th. Yes, on the 13th, on June 13th.
Friday the 13th?
Ooh,
the
yes.
Templar Day, the
Yeah.
curse of the Templars.
Well, from that day onwards, as you know, Israel has moved a series of attacks. Then, of course, there was a counterattacks from Iran. But as you know, we don't like to just simply analyze the surface of the iceberg. We like to go deep under, and so publish a couple of articles regarding this subject that is of course connected to volume 10 of my Confessions, Islamic, Freemasonry and the secret societies behind the eternal conflict in the Middle East. And of course, maybe we have a possibility here that things might change soon, counteracting the evil of those ayatollahs and mullahs that for decades have oppressed the Iranian people. But of course, you're never really totally free, so we have a lot to talk about today. First of all, Christy, who are the sponsors of today's show?
Stephanie and Daniel Estes. Thank you very much for your donations.
And if you want to become a sponsor of our show, you can do it both anonymously or publicly, and you can do it through GoFundMe and Cash App. I'm going to now provide you with the GoFundMe link on the screen, but you can also find the Cash App handle at leozagami.com, together with my latest articles. And we're going to start analyzing my latest article right now after I post this link here on the screen. There is a lot of people who have tuned in, and I'm very glad.
Me too.
I'm very
It's
glad
great.
about that, because we are trying to launch also a middle of the week presence for the Leo Zagami show, thanks to our sponsors and thanks to all the people who are continuing to purchase also our books, starting from the last installment of my Confession series, Volume 12, which is History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and the Luciferian Court. There is a lot to say about today's subject. It's the hot subject of the day. And we will start with analyzing my article, the latest article on leozagami.com. Christy, of course, you are the editor, but I want to also use you at times to read segments of these articles.
I practiced.
You have practiced.
I practiced a little bit.
By editing them. Okay, so people, they simply think about a confrontation between Israel and Iran. Iran, of course, is backed by China and Russia, but there is much more to it. And so here we go. Iranian Freemasonry versus Khamenei, not to be confused with Khomeini, who is in charge since the late 80s of the Islamic State of Iran that replaced the previous empire of the Pahlavi. But we actually prefer the modernization of the Shah. I was quite lucky to visit Iran in 1976. As a little boy, I was on my way to India, to Bombay, as they used to call it. Now it's Mumbai. And then later on, I went also to Sri Lanka with my father for a few months, my father and mother. But at one point, I felt sick, so I had to land and stay in Tehran. But I still remember, of course, the airport, because that's the place where I puked my head off. Because I had all these injections that they used to make. Of course, you were obliged to make certain injections before you went to these, between brackets, third world countries, and I, of course, felt terribly sick. And I will continue to feel terribly sick even after I arrived in Mumbai for a couple of weeks. But in reality, I remember the staircase and the exit of the airport of Tehran as this luxury place built with mahogany wood and everything, incredibly luxurious.
In the airport?
In the airport.
Wow.
I mean, this was, of course, my impression of Iran at the tender age of 6. Aside from the fact that I have Iranian blood, of course, like most of the black aristocracy in Italy, but also because it's connected with Sicily, the Fatimid, and I talked about that in volume 10 of my Confession, Zaham, and Ali Zaham, this, and so, of course, it brings me right there to address this whole thing also with this partly Iranian blood line, which I have carrying in me. But there is a lot of Iranians in exile who are watching what is happening today, and they are happy that Israel has attacked these criminals, these ayatollahs that, like I explained in volume 10 of my Confessions, from the 60s onwards, they mixed the worst elements of fundamentalism Islam, Shia Islam, together with Marxism, to create this Islamo-communist republic with the supreme leader on top. However, like I explained in this article that we will go and analyze now, Iranian Freemasonry is now behind all the actions that you are seeing here. And we will be discussing also Trump, who has said he's going to see what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks and decide if intervening or not, giving his support. of course, we have a war between good and evil that is taking place. And there is also those people who are siding, of course, against Netanyahu, even defining him as the Antichrist. But maybe they need to study a little bit better the Khamenei of the situation here. Khamenei, who was called in a derogatory term, Khamenei Zahak. And so today we will also go and analyze who is this character here, the snake
He
holder.
looks like him.
Yeah, because he is the reincarnation. That's what the Grand Lodge of Iran believes. The Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile, which is based here in Southern California, who has been very active in support of their protector, their supreme protector, which is the Prince Regent of the Pahlavi dynasty, the son of the last Shah of Iran. Now, Khamenei Zahak, this is a term that was used by one of those women revolutionaries that was arrested during those protests that went on between 2019 and 2022. Iranian women protested against the current regime, which is particularly oppressive towards women, as you can imagine. Now, Sefide Kolian, she is this journalist and activist who apparently used the term and was soon after arrested. The term was to associate the evil incarnate of Zahak, one of the protagonists of Zoroastrianism and Persian mythology, with Khamenei. So this association of these two figures it seems to be of importance, of relevance, because as they start spreading the word around, more and more protesters are now associating Ayatollah Khamenei, which you see on the right, with his alleged predecessor in evil, Zahak. Zahak is said to be the spiritual son or the son of Ahriman. Ahriman is one of is like the devil in the Zoroastrian tradition. We have, of course, knowledge of Ahriman, especially here in the West, thanks to Rudolf Steiner. So it's rather interesting that for a period of time, Sefide Kolian, which is this well-known Iranian political activist, which I showed you, also journalist, and all the various protesters use this term, Khamenei Zahak. And she said, Khamenei Zahak, we will take you in under the ground. On January 19, 2019, Sefide Kolian, though, was paraded with other rebels in a documentary broadcast by Iranian national TV. Back then, we were in January 2019, let's say that the general attention of the world wasn't really on Iran, but they started to move against the current regime. And the Iranian national television accused this woman and other activists of wanting to overthrow the Iranian regime on behalf of Donald J. Trump. So already back then we have this link between a woman that accuses Khamenei of being Zahak with Donald J. Trump in his first term in office. Now, I would like Christy to read this part, in particular this paragraph here.
Okay. Sefide Kolian was arrested the day after the documentary was broadcast and was released on only 4 years and nearly 2 months later from Evin prison in Tehran on March 15, 2023, only to be rearrested again a couple of months later, May 5, 2023, where she was kept in prison for another 2 years. On June 11th of this year, Kolian was finally released 2 days before the Iran-Israel war began on June 13, 2025, when Israel launched a surprise attack on dozens of Iranian targets. Was this a coincidence? Of course not.
And this is the person of interest who spent most of her life in the last few years in jail because of her opposition to the regime. Now, what people don't know is that the Iranian protesters, including Sefideh Kolian, who compared Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, to Zahak, this significant figure in the Zoroastrianism and Persian mythology, known for his tyranny. He wasn't a good guy, absolutely. If he was the son of Ahriman, the devil, he couldn't be a good guy. He was almost like the Antichrist of the Zoroastrian tradition. Well, most people don't know that the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile was behind this association of Ali Khamenei with Zahak's image. So, and why is that? This is very important, guys. What I'm about to tell you is not known to the majority of people because very few people have knowledge really of Freemasonry, and even less people have knowledge of the symbolism, the real symbolism behind Freemasonry. In this case, the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile is defined by this symbol, which is found in the Grand Officers also of the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile, and of course they also have a Supreme Council of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite. Both are in Santa Monica Boulevard. They have their temple there. Initially, this obedience was chartered thanks to the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. However, later on, they came into an understanding with the Grand Lodge of California, and now actually all the members of the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile are mutual members of the Grand Lodge of California. They have this not only understanding, but since I think 2016, there was a meeting in a lodge here in San Diego, the Java Lodge, in which they came to a mutual recognition, full mutual recognition. So I'm bringing you deeper and deeper because it's very important, guys, that we have an understanding of this symbol that characterizes the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile. And what is this symbol? This symbol is actually connected to Zoroastrianism.
What is that exactly?
Is known as the Faravar. Is believed to be a depiction of Fravashi, who is a guardian angel or a person's individual divine guiding spirit. But this symbol is also associated with Ahura Mazda, which is the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism, and of course, the main enemy of Ahriman and Lucifer. Now, the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile uses Faravar as its symbol, also reflecting the connection to Iranian heritage and culture. And this is significant because the Faravar symbol, while rooted in Zoroastrianism, and I'm going to show you some example because, of course, here I've showed you the example that is the one known to Freemasonry, but we can simply put the Faravar symbol on Google and you will get a bunch of things connected to this symbol, including a comment by the AI overview. Please.
The Faravar is a prominent symbol in Zoroastrianism.
Now, I always try to
I
get
was trying
Christy
to get this is what I practice. Zoroastrial.
Now, okay, I give you, it's easy. Now, the Zoroastrians are behind also, it's a very ancient religion connected also to the roots of astrology. So if you think of astrology and you think of Zoroastrianism.
It's so hard for Americans
Zoroastrianism.
to say that. Zoroastrianism.
Okay, so Zoroastrianism.
And an ancient Persian culture often depicted, where'd it go? as a winged disc with a human figure emerging from it. It represents a complex concept with various interpretations, including guardian
An angel, like we said, divine grace,
and the tenets of Zoroastrianism.
Brava,
The symbol is not just religious, but also carries cultural significance, representing Persian identity and history. I just want to say real quick, it reminds me of ISIS.
And not only
the wings, though.
The winged actually, it could remind actually of another symbol that was popular in ancient Egypt. But let's go and check it out, because like I said, this is a very important, I mean, it's originally religious in nature, but has, like Christy just said, the connotations are numerous, and it's deeply connected with the Iranian culture. So here, let's go and define, I mean, what we find here. You see, we have the Faraver here with very clear with the human guy with the angels. So I mean, it's a little bit, and here we have this connection which goes all the way. You see, it's present very much, and it's very the symbol meaning of Faravar. Here it has actually a complete that we could actually go and analyze. Let's go and analyze what they say on the symbolism on Faravar on Reddit. Here, Christy, you have various points that you can show to our audience.
I'll start from the left. Ring in hand, symbolic of convenient and covenant.
Ring in the hand,
ring in hand.
Covenant, and promises, especially in marriage. You wear a ring, no?
Right. Hand pointing upwards, symbolic of choosing the right path. Aged male figure represents age and wisdom. Central ring, eternity of the universe and soul. A loop facing the back, a negative force. 3 opposing principles of Zoroaster. Bad thoughts, bad words, bad deeds. Loop facing the face, positive force. 3 principles of Zoroaster. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds.
So here we have like an alternative of negative force and positive force, which also brings us to the understanding of why Zoroastrianism has also been indicated as a major influence on some Gnostic currents, and also it was very much close to the mind of Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati. In fact, I talk about this in volume 9 of my Confessions, where I describe the fact that in the Illuminati, they tried to, for the months of the year, use the Zoroastrian names, the names in Farsi. That is the Persian language. The Persian language is called Farsi or Persi. But in reality, most pronounce it as Farsi. So the language that they talk, the Iranians in exile, is the Farsi language. This is very important also. It's a very important element of their identity. But like I said, the Faraver is the most famous Iranian symbol, and it's like we said, connected to the guardian angel, to the divine grace, to the king, to the royal power, and to the tenets of Zoroastrianism, which are particularly close to the Grand Lodge of Iran in exile. That's why they use it on their own jewels, lodge jewels. Now, various civilizations worldwide have depicted the winged sun disk. We discussed earlier on, including Egypt. Then we have, Babylonia, Sumer, Assyria, which of course is close to this, and Judah, because Assyria is part of what is modern Iran. If first appeared in its present form during what is known as the Achaemenid Empire, and this was a long time before Christ, at least 500 years before Christ, and it continued later on with the Sassanian Empire, all the way to the Muslim Arabs and the suppression of the Persian culture, or the integration of Zoroastrianism in Sufism. For example, there is elements of Zoroastrianism because they, like I explained in volume 10 of my Confessions, they didn't just throw all their past traditions out of the window, but when the Illuminati of the time accepted, for example, the Quran as their book and as their religion, they didn't throw everything away, and they kept it hidden, especially within secret societies that then manifested in the Muslim world as the Sufis. That's why the Sufis were born first within the Shia world, which was a minority, and it's always been a minority. Now, it's important of this because this connection with Freemasonry then brings us all the way to through the religions of Zoroastrian religion, the Shia religion. It brings us, of course, to the Shah, to the Pahlavis, who were the last dynasty, but there were dynasties before the Pahlavis. Now, remember that these are places of very ancient tradition, and I mean the actual the traditions that we're talking about go all the way to the very roots of our civilization, and for that reason also the roots of the Illuminati, of Freemasonry, and the wisdom that we have in the principles of Zoroastrianism are, of course, principles that, regardless of the fact that, of course, they come before Christianity, but then, of course, then we have now today, imagine, in modern Iran, a growth of Christianity, because a lot of people are rejecting this Shia the Shia approach, especially the 12th Shia, because that's what within the Shia, then you have a variety of other sects, and that's the one that is in charge of Iran. But because of their fundamentalism, because of the way they have really approached this religion, the people tend to dislike it more than like it when they see it so oppressive. You see, when the Shia were a minority and they were maybe at the time quite illuminated by their ancient past, they would probably never have imagined to implement and mix this whole thing with Marxism in the 60s and 70s, like I explained in volume 10. That was the idea that ultimately in 1979 brought to power a guy like Khomeini. Now, Khomeini, not Khamenei, the present Ayatollah and supreme leader, was the guy that we all remember from the 70s and 80s. And he made a variety of promises, a lot of promises. He promised the Iranians that when he will be in power, before, of course, arriving and taking power thanks to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, he was exiled in Paris, protected by the Grand Orient of France. This is an important element because I explain how the Grand Orient of France played an important role in the Middle East in volume 10 of my Confessions. Now, the Khomeini was promising free education, free sanitary, free medicines, free this and free that. In the end, he didn't give anything of what he promised, aside from oppression. And so that doesn't really put, the people in a position to like their religious leaders. Now, in the last couple of days, as they know that, as Khamenei knows that he's living on borrowed time, he has relayed a lot of his power to the Revolutionary Guard in an attempt, in case he gets whacked, because that's highly probable, that they will continue. But there is less and less people who are really wanting this wanting this situation to continue and want the Iranian Islamic Republic to continue, because like I also explained in my book here, volume 10, they were the ones that in the 1960s rehashed the assassins, rehashed the evil ways of fundamentalism that were never really of the Sunni Muslims, but were of those minorities within Shia Islam that somehow were born out of the infamous Cairo Lodge, when Cairo was in the hands of the Fatimid, which were a Shia Islamic sect and religion that dominated for centuries, and at one point had power all over the Middle East. So at one point, though, the Seljuk Turks arrived, they arrived even in Iran, they arrived and busted the bubble of Shia expansion. And at one point, of course, there was the Knights Templars in the Middle East with the Crusades, because when the Pope saw that the Seljuks and the Sunnis were expanding so fast, he was worried for his own life and for his own position of power with the Christianity in Europe. And what did he do? He started to send his emissary in the Middle East. They eventually saw how secret societies operated, as I explained in this book, in protections of the pilgrims that went to Mecca and so on, the assassins in particular, and he imitated them, creating groups like the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, related the Knights Templar in particular, and the Knights Templar became the most influential ones and made the secret deal with the Shia in order to fight the Sunni. But all this always comes to the conclusion, like I explained since volume 3 of my Confessions, like Licio Gelli used to say, when you divide and conquer the Muslim world, that's more easy to then control. No, the Shia against the Sunni, then the Shia themselves starts dividing in Ismaili, in a variety of sects that
Divided we fall.
Divided, they definitely fall, and it made it more easy for the Knights Templars to control and to remain in control of the Holy Land for a long time. Eventually, of course, they were themselves defeated. I mean, the Seljuk Turks and later on the Ottoman Empire demonstrated that the Turks really had the upper hand, and they also arrived in Iran, where they also created a long-lasting alliance with the Iranians. However, today we don't really hear much from Erdogan and the Turks, because the situation as it's unfolding is a situation which needs to be explained in the light of a situation that will eventually bring us to a regime change. But what I wanted to tell you, and of course we go now back to my articles, is that at the moment you can, of course, intervene with bombing this, bombing that, but there will never be boots on the ground from the Americans. They know very well that that will be suicidal. It's not Iraq. This is Iran. This is an ancient culture. The only way this ancient culture can change is from the will of their own people. And this is what the son of the last Shah of Iran wants to do. And this is the message that he has delivered, a very important message, which needs to be listened very careful, because what I will tell you later will explain you how things are working behind the scenes. This is the exiled crown prince that has lived most of his life here in the United States of America, after, of course, being exiled after the revolution of 1979 with the rest of the Pahlavi. The father died a year after Ayatollah Khomeini took power and ended ended what was a incredible sign of modernity in the Middle East, because that's what Iran was. However, the father also did some erroneous moves. It's not all nice, otherwise Iranians would have not supported these crazy ayatollahs and their religious fundamentalism. There was something that was done that was wrong, especially in particular, the father made an extensive use of the secret police to go after his enemies and stuff. That wasn't really in line with what the Crown Prince wants to do now, which initially from 1986, his proposal that he gave after himself was nominated the king here in exile, a nomination also that put him in a confrontation with the American government. Let's not forget that if we are in this situation, it's because of Jimmy Carter, the second worst president in history, of course, after Joe Biden. And both have a common denominator. They are Democrats. But now let's go to the exiled Crown Prince and what his message is.
جمهوری اسلامی به پایان خود رسیده و در حال
Okay, so now we have, of course, the subtitles. I want to make it also even more clear, extending it to the rest of the screen. Welcome to the Leo Zagami show with Leo and Christy here from Palm Springs, California, live.
میهنانم جمهوری اسلامی به پایان خود رسیده و در حال سقوط است. خامنه ای همچون موشی هراسان زیر زمین پنهان شده و کنترل اوضاع را از دست داده است. آنچه آغاز شده برگشت ناپذیر است. آینده روشن است و ما با هم از این پیچ تند تاریخ عبور خواهیم کرد. در این روزهای دشوار دل من با همه شهروندان بی‌دفاعی است که آسیب دیدند و قربانی جنگ طلبی و توهمات خامنه‌ای شدند. من سالها کوشیدم تا میهنمان گرفتار آتش جنگ نشود. پایان جمهوری اسلامی، پایان جنگ 46 ساله آن با ملت ایران است. دستگاه سرکوب رژیم در حال فروپاشی است. تنها یک خیزش همگانی لازم است تا این کابوس برای همیشه پایان یابد. اکنون زمان ایستادن است. زمان بازپسگیری ایران.
This image is quite clear. The symbol that you can see next to the Iranian Crown Prince and possible future Shah is a symbol that all Freemasons know very well. I mean, the Akasha leaf is on the side of him because, like we said, he's the great protector of the Iranian Grand Lodge that was founded at the end of the 60s, but the history of Islamic Freemasonry spans over 2.5 centuries.
My proposition in terms of what can happen and needs to happen is, and we've seen to some extent some level of success, let's say under the first administration of President Trump, that maximum pressure did pay some dividends. It isolated the regime more, it curtailed their means to be able to finance and fuel their war machine. Unfortunately, that was reversed under the Biden administration, where over $200 billion worth of oil sale that Iran should not have, the regime should not have had access to, only helped them to further expand and support their proxies, whether it's the Houthis or it is Hezbollah or Hamas. And this is not a coincidence that as a result of that, the regime felt invigorated and continued that path.
Now, this is an interview that he gave a month ago, an interview where he criticized, as you just heard, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who, of course, just like his predecessor from the Democratic Party, Obama, facilitated in every way possible Iran. If Iran has a nuclear program now that we have to eliminate, is because, if you remember, Obama sent them billions with a big plane. And this was a gift that was never explained to the American people. But Barack Hussein Obama is, of course, somebody we need to keep not in our prayers, but in a prayers that he goes to hell, because the guy is not only the co-founder of ISIS, but he has been the guy who has destabilized further the Middle East, just as his neocons predecessors. Now, what is happening here is difficult to understand for the common man, because everybody says Trump promises no wars, and then instead he's thinking of going into war with Israel, destabilizing the whole Middle East. No, that's not the case here, guys, because Trump has been at it for years since his first mandate. He has promised the people who are in the order who controls the Grand Lodge of Iran that he will support them. Now, this is also a very important article which I published. We might go back to the other article. This is an article I published 2 days ago, and it's a rather prophetic article, but it's very down to the point, because immediately after I published this article, soon after, people started to talk again about the Pahlavis going back to power, left, right, and center. But also, it gives the correct explanation of why the Israelis call it Rising Lion. Rising Lion, not only because of the Lion of Judah, but also because of the Lion of Iran, a rising lion that draws its inspiration, so not only from, of course, the Bible, but also from Persia, from the lion and the sun. The symbol of the imperial lion and the sun is also the symbol of an order which is at the core of the Grand Lodge of Iran in exile. These are the grand officers. These are the people who have supported with their families the Shah since his exile here in America. But also the Shah was studying for a number of years in Cairo, because you always end up in one way or another in Cairo when you are in the Middle East, because that's where the elite of the Middle East hangs out, as I explained in volume 10 of my confession, with my own personal experience also in Egypt. But going back to the Shir or Khurshid, which is the sun and the lion, this is also the symbol of an order, like I said, that then was at the basis of the reawakening of Freemasonry in Iran. And it's very important to explain this, because at one point the Pahlavi dynasty with its founder wasn't really, let's say, it wasn't really friendly with Freemasonry, because the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty, who was himself a military, who took the power from his predecessors, who were the Qajar dynasty, wanted to follow wanted to imitate Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, and he thought that he could have maybe good allies in them, because he said, well, we are the real Aryans, and historically that's correct. They are the real Aryans, I mean, race-wise, but that meant also eliminating for a period Freemasonry. Freemasonry has a long history, and secret societies have the Illuminati and secret societies in general have a long history, because, like we said, if there is a birthplace of the very idea of secret societies is Iran, Syria, all the areas that now are in Iraq. Those are the areas where we had the very roots of a civilization. So there is an order that is the imperial order of the sun and the lion. And I want to show it because this is very important for our story here. Now you see this, you see the lion and the sun in this. It's the order of the lion and the sun. It was instituted by Fatih Ali Shah of the Qajar dynasty, the dynasty that preceded the Pahlavi. And in 1925, under the Pahlavi, it became the Order of Humayun. And when, this is very important for our story, because then in the 1950s, in the early 1950s, a Pahlavi lodge appeared that was later on nominated the Lodge Humayun. And this lodge will be used by the CIA and the MI6 to facilitate the coup that will keep in power the Pahlavi dynasties. The Pahlavi dynasty is, of course, the last that ruled Iran as their monarchy. And it took power from the Qajar dynasty in 1925 after the 1921 coup d'etat, when a 42-year-old Reza Khan, the grandfather of the one we just saw, Reza Pahlavi, the grandfather, he was a brigadier general. He was a soldier who was promoted and led the British-run Persian Cossack Brigade. And the Persian Cossack Brigade was a very powerful group of people, guys, in the military. I mean, the Cossacks were fierce warriors. And for that reason, when they eventually transformed themselves also in an intelligent secret service that went after political opponents, they became rather ruthless. And for that reason, a lot of people have advised the current Pahlavi regent, who might become again the Shah under a constitutional monarchy, to never again have anything like the Cossacks, because they were very ruthless. And because of the way they were, they inspired the opposition, and people like Ayatollah Taleghani, people like that, who went and picked up on the roots of fundamentalism Islam in the Ashashins and revamped it. And then, of course, then Iran, once they took control of the situation in 1979, then they kind of became the supreme destabilizers of the Middle East. They started to support even the Sunni Salafist groups like Hamas, but also like many other, even Shia, like Hezbollah. And all the terrorists of the Middle East suddenly had a place where they could go and hang out, and they could go and receive support, military training, and whatnot. That's why Iran is the place it is today. But, so this is very important also, that people understand, yes, the Shah, the father of Reza, might have been a little bit decadent in his ways, might have been supported by the CIA and the MI6. But guys, the alternative, it's a bunch of crazy ayatollahs and crazy mullahs who have been really destabilizing the world as we know it. And the Middle East would be definitely a different place without these fundamentalist lunatics, because that's what they are. We have to be honest about that. Now, in regards to the Reza Shah Pahlavi, who was the first Shah, like I said, he wasn't very much in line with having Freemasonry back in Iran, after Freemasonry had a history, no, in the past, because in the 18th century, the aristocrats of the empire of the Qajar dynasty, they went to London and got initiated, and then went back to Iran and started to say, wow. Then other ones got initiated in France, so the Illuminati, they brought, at one point they were so into creating secret societies that they created their own Illuminati in Iran, and everybody was joined. So, I mean, secret societies and the Iranians is like one thing. They absolutely love the whole concept. They are obsessed with the whole concept. Patrick Bet-David, who is that podcaster I watch every morning, who is himself born in Iran in 1978, He wrote one book, and it's about a secret society that he talks about. I don't know if it's fiction or real, but I mean, he seems to be very much into the idea. At one point, though, in 1941, the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty was pushed to resign because of his support, of course, I guess, for his support towards maybe Nazism or Mussolini and all that. After the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran in 1931, he was forced to abdicate, and his oldest son, Mohammad Reza Shah, finally took power. And he's the one that we all remember that basically took power and kept his power until Ayatollah Khomeini took it from him. This is, let's remember, guys, that we're talking about constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy is also something that can be very fragile because, of course, with the Pahlavi, we were talking more about an authoritarian monarchy. But after all, an imperial state of Iran couldn't be really very democratic. It was in its essence the imperial state of Persia until 1935. So, I mean, Pahlavi Iran didn't really have, no? It was pretty much a absolute monarchy in every sense. And so, with his Persian Cossacks that then he transformed in this, secret police and all that, with the fact that at one point, though, there was a coup d'etat in 1953 because there was an attempt from a guy called Mohammad Mossadegh to change things up. An attempt that wasn't really liked by neither, So this was the 30th prime minister. And as you can see here, its government was overthrown in 1950, coup aided by the intelligence agencies of the United Kingdom and the United States. So, I mean, it's pretty, I'm not talking here about some state secret. It's pretty obvious, what happened here. In any case, at that point, the lodge, the Pahlavi lodge, that was connected to this order, the Order of the Lion and the Sun, took connection with the lodge in Cairo, the obscure lodge in Cairo, Grand Lodge, and they started to put the basis of Freemasonry. Freemasonry became very popular suddenly under the Shah. His father wouldn't probably approve, but of course, it was a different Iran. Modernization, people were dressing the Western way, lodges were founded by the Grand Lodge of Scotland, United Grand Lodge. Everybody had their lodge in Iran, even foreign obediences had founded the lodges there. There was, of course, connections that were made. But at one point, of course, the Grand Orient of France who was fighting always traditionally with the Grand Lodge de France, the Brits, they instead seem to have supported the Ayatollah Khomeini. So, I mean, it's all, it fits. Now, the connection between Iran and the Vatican, somebody's question is making an intelligent question here on the chat, so I want to answer the question. Now, the Vatican had the possibility of connecting with Iran through the Freemasons. This is something that was confirmed in a series also of testimonies that were given for a book called Via col Vento in Vaticano. And so when the Vatican needed to connect with Iran, they will always use the Freemasons. And when in 1979, and this is actually a citation that I made thanks to a book that you purchased of that guy Russo, that mafiosi,
Yeah.
It's a book by Johnny
Russo.
Johnny Russo. He is still alive and kicking. I think he's here on YouTube. You can find it. He testimonied that he was recruited by the Vatican and the CIA to go in January 1979 to pick up all the gold of Iran for the Pahlavi, put it on a plane, and of course bring it in the Vatican vaults of the YOR of the Vatican Bank. And that happened. So they recruited a mafiosi, an Italo-American, Gianni Russo, to go in Sicily, recruit a bunch of Sicilian mobsters, bring them to Tehran, and get the gold out of Tehran before.
I believe it.
No, but it's true. It's true. I had this confirmed later on by various sources, including people of the P2. So it's not just
what a bunch of crooks.
So, okay, when the gold was brought out with the Pahlavi, this is interesting because now we would like to know where this gold is, and if
where's the gold?
No, and if the Pahlavi go back in power, will the Vatican give back the gold? I have my doubts. However,
no,
I have doubt, but whatever. In any case, what happened was that they arrived there, and there is a whole description, very in-depth description, which I actually picked up, cited some of it in my book, because I think it's quite fascinating, the whole story. Flying from Sicily to Tehran, these mobsters arriving in a situation revolutionary,
sounds like a movie.
And picking up all this gold.
Did they make a movie?
No, they didn't make a movie about that. But one interesting thing is, once they got the gold to the Vatican, the Ayatollah Khomeini arrived in power, and at that point, guys, that's truly hilarious, because Ayatollah Khomeini went on with with his face serious, and he said, "Pahlavi left with nothing." What a liar! So I mean, the actual victims of it all are the Iranian people who believed in the lies of this coward, this crook, Ayatollah Khomeini, who didn't have anything because all the gold was brought away. And so who did he ask for money? Who do you think he asked for money for? At that point, in a situation here in which you have a lot of tension.
America?
No.
The Vatican?
No. Russia.
Oh, Russia?
Yes, and that's why Russia now is a little bit worried, because Russia has borrowed various billions to these Ayatollah crooks, and for that reason, they are kind of like they're saying, America, don't you dare attack Iran. We need to get that money back here. It's not about people think about ideology, religion, and all this.
It's all about the cash, man.
It's all about the cash. It's
For
always,
some people, anyway.
It's always about the cash. So I remember one day I was in St. Petersburg, and we had a few drinks with some Russians.
Your stories in St. Petersburg's are out of this world.
Well, as you know, I used to work also for the Russian Ministry of Culture. And so one day I was with a few Russian people. I was with my manager in St. Petersburg there at the end of the night, and we started to talk about Iran and the money they owned to Russia. And at the time, I remember, and we're talking about, it could have been 1999, it was something between 5 and 6 billion of 1999, which in today's money, it's a lot more. And who knows if in the meantime they borrowed other money. But I remember the faces of these Russians. I said, how can you trust those crooks to give you back the money? I said, and they were like, no, but they respect us. They respect, but they respect whatever. But the thing is, it's not what's your respect. Will they ever give you back the money? I remember I was there on the door, about to go back home. I had a night, probably a few drinks that night, but I remember I was about to shut the door and I was still talking about these billions to Iran. So this is something that always kind of I have in my memory, these billions.
You never told me about that.
No, well, I was with Kostya.
That's just another story.
It's one of the many stories.
You need a storybook on Russia.
Absolutely. Now, let's remember, guys, that Iran is also the birthplace of Sufism. Jalaluddin Rumi, the great poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi. Rumi is buried in Turkey. I've been there to his burial place, so I know where he was buried, in Konya. But in reality, he was born in Iran. He is from Iran. And Sufism really emerged from from like I always said, from this mix, no, mixing various elements in their divine revelations, including Zoroastrianism. Of course, if you go and tell that to a Muslim, he will immediately say no. And so it's always a little bit precarious to discuss certain subjects. But I must say that when I published this book, I have received excellent reviews from the Sufis and from the Muslims in general. This is a book that has 5 stars, on the contrary of Volume 12, which some asshole has ruined by
some Jesuits. They're the most
No.
evil. Those Jesuits, they're the most evil.
Somebody is saying hello from Israel. Hello to their friends, also numerous friends who follow us from Israel. And in regards to the Shia Islamists and their and the way that they have carried on their work up until now, I hope that sooner or later we can get rid of them for the people of Iran, mostly for the people of Iran, because really, guys, it's very sad to see these ignorant people, because the problem with the clerics, the Shia clerics, is that they really tend to indicate us reading only the Quran, and that's it. If you start reading something else, they are immediately, oh no, you know, everything is in the Quran. Okay, let's for a moment embrace the fact that the Quran is a divine revealed book. But the fact is that you need to also read all other books to have a clear idea of how the world is run. No, you can't just think that the truth is revealed only in one book. Because, I mean, plus the Persians, of course, are linked to Zoroastrianism. We said Zoroastrianism is a very ancient thing, very ancient faith. And the fact that now we have this actual accusation made, even publicly by a lot of people, that Ali Khamenei is the actual reincarnation of one of the most evil figures of the Persian mythology, this Zahak. Now, it is said that in the year 1000, there was a writer in today's Iran who wrote about Zahak the snake holder. That's how he was known. That's why you have Zahak, the snake holder, with a snake on his, you can see the snake coming out of his shoulders. Here, you see? Yes, yeah. 2 snakes, one here and one here. This guy was an emissary of Ahriman. And Ahriman is evil incarnate, is Satan. And today, Ahriman is, of course, incarnating with the cyber Satan. And who is quite interesting that Rudolf Steiner, who relaunched the image of Ahriman also into the Christian world, because, it was only known to people who had studied the Zoroastrianism up until he did a series of lectures in which he presented Ahriman, saying that he will incarnate in the Western world. But this incarnation, as I explained in volume 7 of my confession, in fact, here you have the image of Ahriman. That is Ahriman, and Ahriman is incarnating in cyber Satan, in the AI, is manifesting through the AI. And that's a very interesting thing, because then Rudolf Steiner said that there is 2 figures that represent evil, and they are separate figures. One is Ahriman, one is Lucifer. Then in the middle, he said, you have Christ, who represents the balance of these 2 eras. But Lucifer incarnated in a being, for Rudolf Steiner, in China. And I know this might get confusing, guys, so stay with me a second. This is Rudolf Steiner. For those who don't know, Steiner is the inventor of anthropology.
I know him from your books.
Okay. He's a guy who used to be involved with Madame Blavatsky's theosophy, then abandoned theosophy and founded anthroposophy. He was a guy who created a very important movement, a guy who, of course, a lot of people know for his writings, for his lectures that were then transformed in writings. And he started to talk about Ahrimane, like I said, in a series of conferences that then became laid out in books. And Rudolf Steiner said that there was these two separate figures. But Lucifer, he said, incarnated in China. Rudolf Steiner said that it was the Yellow Emperor, also known as Wang Di in China, who was the incarnation of Lucifer. You know, you have Christ, who is the incarnation of God. You have instead this Chinese guy who was the incarnation of Lucifer, and then eventually you have the incarnation of Ahrimane, but you have, of course, the incarnation of Zahak, his son, who is Khamenei. So, I mean, they're all here for the end times, because, you know, that is where we are heading to. And the interesting thing about this Yellow Emperor, guys, is that he's the founder of Chinese culture. I mean, he is considered the guy who gave birth to Chinese culture. So for Rudolf Steiner to say that he was the Lucifer, the ultimate evil, but that fits into the whole thing. Also of the cyber Satan. Who is that is aiding cyber Satan today? And China. Who is aiding Iran today? China. Who sent a mysterious plane to Iran? China. The Yellow Emperor, see, in Chinese mythical sovereign here, legendary dead, blah blah blah, and regarded as the initiator of Chinese culture. He is basically, and then calculated by the Jesuits, though.
Oh, of course, you're always in there.
Now, very important, this element, because as you know, I have a whole chapter in my new book dedicated to the link between the Jesuits and China. And then China is Lucifer. So, I mean, Lucifer is on the cover of this book because this is the eye of Lucifer, and this is Lucifer here, the fallen angel, the Luciferian court, the red flag of Ignacio Loyola, which becomes also the red flag of Mao Zedong and the culture of the Chinese Communist Revolution. So
it's all connected.
It's all connected, guys. Absolutely. And the fact that Wang Di is considered also really the father of Chinese culture and of the Han Chinese. Now, the Han Chinese are the Han people, is the biggest ethnic group in China. So it's like Rudolf Steiner said that the father of the Han Chinese, who are with a global population of over 1.4 billion, are created by Lucifer himself.
Is this like saying George Washington was Lucifer?
No,
kind of.
No,
because the emperor created that. No, I'm not saying it like.
No. Let's not confuse things, because here we're talking about Rudolf Steiner specifically addressing the Han Chinese, the founder as Lucifer. George Washington.
No, I wasn't saying that. I'm not saying that.
Who was actually an English who fought to become an American and led this country to become the greatest country in the world. I think crazy that here there will be a bunch of people who are watching us. Probably
you didn't understand what I was saying.
I would like to understand what you're saying.
No, just like in comparison of the way.
Okay. Like George Washington is the father of this nation. Han is the father. Yeah,
that's what I was saying.
Yeah. We can say that.
That's what I meant.
This figure. Bravo.
You just don't understand me. It's lost in the translation.
Okay. So the Yellow Emperor, Lucifer, creator of the Han people, who are the most, the father of the Han people, who are the most numerous ethnic group in China, which means a lot, because they are taking over the world, is Lucifer. Then Ahriman is supposed to incarnate in the West, but like some people have said, the fact that it incarnates in a man can be the ultimate Antichrist, of course, but because of certain things, certain indications that are given, the demon of demons is said to be actually incarnating in the AI more than anything else. And this will make sense because, like we said, you have Lucifer on one side, Ahriman on the other, and then you have Ahriman as Cyber Satan, like I said in volume 7. There's a whole chapter here about Ahriman as Cyber Satan. It is actually here. Kurzweil and the computerized incarnation of Ahriman. So this is for those who have volume 7. In fact, is here on the card. Now, guys, we have over 300 people that are watching us at the moment, and I would like to go back instead to of course, what is happening in Iran, because my unique perspective has brought out this truth about the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile that was created immediately after the Shah, the father of Reza Pahlavi, was here in the United States. Then, of course, there was also a lot of problems here due to the fact a lot of people say, why did Jimmy Carter facilitate the Ayatollah taking control of the situation? Why, you think? Because apparently the Shah had supported Gerald Ford. This asshole of Jimmy Carter, this peanut guy, this idiot, who is really the biggest idiot, but also the worst president, of course, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who is now, it's really, Christy, I want to ask you a question as an American.
You're American too.
Of course, but you have been an American since you were born. And you were an American when Jimmy Carter was the president. Who is the worst president, you think? Jimmy Carter or Joe Biden?
Joe Biden.
So here we have two.
Well, I was a small child when Carter was president, and I didn't care about politics. I only heard it from my father.
Okay.
And I got to experience Joe Biden as an adult, and that was really bad. I mean, they could have been equally evil. It's just that, it's more relevant for me now. So he was pretty dang evil. I mean, some of the things he did when he left office, Biden, like letting all those criminals. I mean, it was just blatantly.
Well, during his time in office, he let something like 20 million illegals in this country, probably.
And then the criminals.
All the criminals that went with it. If now we have a problem and ICE has to do what they have to do, is because of Joe Biden's administration. However, Joe Biden says he was in charge of the autopen. I have my doubts. I think that the guy who was really in charge was Barack Hussein Obama together with Soros. And guys, ladies and gentlemen, just before we go, you know that the biggest event of this weekend was the marriage of Alex Soros with the former lover of Hillary Clinton, Huma. Yes.
Didn't know.
You didn't know that?
No.
Well, but
Huma used to talk about her.
Yes, I
thought she was a lesbian.
Well, she was a lesbian, but apparently she got to marry the man of his dreams, Alex Soros. Married Alex Soros. The marriage, of course, Huma Abedin and Alex Soros got married on Saturday when there was the No Kings protest, everything. You had these two people getting married. It's quite incredible, no? I mean, America, but they did it on purpose. So, then you have all the big guests that went there. And it's like, of course, this great marriage between, and she's older than him. She's old. Between Sabati and Frankis. Who you think was guest there?
Hillary, definitely
Okay,
Hillary.
definitely.
And like Taylor Swift.
Do you think there was also the Rothschild? Because there was the Rothschilds.
I don't know much about the Rothschilds.
Nikki Hilton Rothschild was there.
Oh my gosh, that's who she married? A Rothschild?
No,
Nikki?
she was guested there. Huma Abedin.
I know. Nikki Hilton, that's Paris Hilton's sister. Isn't it Nikki?
She's so.
And so she married a Hilton.
She
Rothschild.
married a Rothschild.
I
She
didn't
must
know.
have married a Rothschild. I didn't know about
I
this.
know this
Here
stuff.
it is.
I know a lot.
Yeah, she looks like
That's
Paris Hilton.
Hilton's
So
sister.
Paris Hilton married a Rothschild.
No,
Yes.
her.
Yeah, no, sorry,
Nikki
Nikki
Hilton.
Hilton.
She's a little sister.
Little sister. Mani
So-
mortacci.
I know all this stuff.
Well,
for some
well,
stupid
in
reason.
any case, the people who were there for this lavish wedding were the elite of the Democratic Party. I think also Chuck Schumer was there. This is just like, no. And I mean, no comment. I mean, whatever. Alex Soros is, of course, in charge now of his father's open society, and so he's in charge also of all the futures coup d'etats that are going on. But of course, not of this one, because they will have left the Ayatollahs forever. Trump now has given the green light to Israel. But of course, now we are still left with, are we going to intervene or not? First of all, forget, there never is going to be any boots on the ground from America in Iran, but there will be an encouragement towards a regime change. That is, with the Pahlavis going back into power, or at least for a transitionary period holding, because what Pahlavi has said also last year is very indicative. I read a very interesting figure that he said last year. He said, we don't want, America to give us military or money or anything. We simply want your friendship.
Oh.
That is, because he said we want to, and when he nominated, he was nominated king, and he was in America. Of course, this didn't go really down well with the American administration, because to have a king in exile, there's something with aristocracy and royalty and being an American. I know that from when I got interviewed for my citizenship. They kept me there an hour and a quarter to ask me all my family lines, things, if I had a claim to some kingdom in foreign land or whatever. I mean, they were pretty much thorough on that. And it kind of, maybe it's a legacy left from 1776. No?
I don't know.
I
I know that I'm just a regular girl, and I stand next to you, and they think I'm a princess, an aristocrat.
Well, that's great. That's great. Absolutely. Like I said, we have done today a show to explain to all of you that aside from what they are discussing, are we going to use cluster bombs? Are we not going to use cluster bombs? Are we going to intervene or are we not going to intervene? Remember one thing about Iran. This is not Iraq. This is not like some kind of Saddam Hussein situation. Yes, of course, we have to get rid of the Ayatollah. We have to get rid, but once, most of this revolutionary guard and the Pasdaran of Iran have been eliminated because Israel has been very chung. And the fact that now Iran has destroyed a hospital with old folks inside Israel, a hospital full of Israeli people, that is basically signing the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, because at that point, in front of a destroyed hospital, I saw the face of Netanyahu, and Netanyahu was like, he's dead. This is it. I mean, imagine destroying a hospital in Israel full of Israeli people who couldn't move because they were in the hospital. I mean, you can attack military installations. You can, you can even attack a civilian group of buildings, but you can't attack a hospital. It's completely out of order. Don't you think, Christine?
Of course.
I mean, a hospital is really something that should have totally be avoided in every way. So but thank you so much, guys, for following us today. And I hope that aside from the Illuminati wanting to be the cult of reason, there is no reason in what the Ayatollahs have done, or every religious fundamentalist who has mixed up ideas of communism with Islam and created this diabolic and infernal Islamic republic that then has destabilized forever the Middle East. The Middle East, of course, people will say Israel has attacked also Gaza and hospitals as well as there. Guys, war doesn't have winners. Remember, that is there's never a winner in war. But one thing we can say is that we hope that once we get rid of all the lunatics, especially knowing that Iran has given military support to all this, even to the Hamas and so on. Now, regarding Arafat, and Palestine and the claims they have for having their own land, let's not forget, though, that Arafat's uncle was the guy who suggested the Holocaust to Adolf Hitler. So, it's like there is always...
Everybody needs to know the backstories of everything.
Yes.
That's why they need to buy your books. So
yes. So,
find out the backstory.
But it's not like you have the right and the wrong. You have always, people in the wrong on both sides. However, when a couple of days ago, when I published my first article on the topic on Zagami.com, my friend Michael Jacob, former CIA, former Navy SEAL, and so on, asked me, are the Iranians better off with the Pahlavi than they will be with the current Ayatollahs and their administration, which is basically a oppressive dictatorship that doesn't permit women to be women and everything else? Well, I would say that if we have two evils, well, in this,
the lesser.
It's definitely the lesser evil. Pahlavi will bring Iran back into the Western fold. And I think that people need to understand, Iranians are not Arabs. There is, of course, Arab minorities present in it, but they are not Arabs. People tend to also confuse that, because, when they say, Iran, just another bunch of...
like NQ, Iraq, Iran. So it's just like...
whatever, they're all Arabs, Arab, whatever, But they are not. There's a profound difference, guys. The Iranians have a millenary culture, and even Trump himself knows very well that he has to tackle this whole thing, only through the Pahlavi and the Grand Lodge of Iran in Exile. They have the key to then say to the Iranians, we need a change. When Pahlavi, I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years, he went and said, we need to do something about what's happening in Iran. 80,000 people showed up in Los Angeles. 80,000.
Yeah.
80,000 people followed Reza Pahlavi in Los Angeles for a protest against the current Iranian regime. So I think that the Pahlavi have definitely the key for us to avoid boots on the ground and any further involvement. And maybe we can change things around also in the rest of the Middle East. Of course, guys, at one point, Israel and Netanyahu needs to be put a little bit in his place, because otherwise they have a tendency to get out of control, And of course, that tendency to get out of control then is easily criticized by the rest of the Middle East, that is always indicating the Zionists. So, guys, we need to balance things in a very diplomatic fashion. I thank all of you for tuning in today. I thank our sponsors. Who are our sponsors today, Christy?
Stephanie and Daniel Estes.
Thank you very much, guys. If you want, you can sponsor both anonymously or publicly, depending from you. You can also help us out by purchasing all our books. Today we discussed Volume 7, Volume 12, Volume 10, and Volume 9. And now I'm going to go and have lunch, and I'm going to discuss with my wife this book, Zagami Family Cookbook. Christy, are we going to have lunch now? Because we didn't have lunch. Okay.
That's what happens on a Thursday.
Yes. And let us know if you want us again on a Thursday. Seems a lot of people are enjoying it. And we will see you soon on Saturday, for our main show of the week. Don't miss it. Don't miss it, guys. I recommend you. This is great stuff that is happening soon. Trump said he was the hunted, and now he's the hunt.
I've had it for a long time. The first time I had it, but you guys were after me. I said I had to focus. I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. It's a big difference. Big difference.
It's a big difference. We see you on Saturday. Whoa! Oh, applause. The applause. But first of all, guys, remember, we always leave you with a little dance, and Vincenzo Viceversa's Medieval. He's the guy who makes that book.
In that time,
but he also makes this great music.
so many steps in the wrong direction.
I want to see you dance.
In the negative utopia, science, technology, social organization, dehumanization. In the negative utopia, science, technology, social organization.
Yes! We see you Saturday for the Real Zagami Show.
technology, social organization,